This video is to show you the basic usage of Iximiuz Labs. So let's start if you first meet it. Typically you would land here on the Labs page as a non-signed-in user. Now, in order to sign in or sign up or use the Labs, all you're going to give to the platform is your GitHub user. So in terms of personal identifiable data, if you want to use the Labs, you want to use the free tier, you're actually not putting in any data other than your GitHub account. And then it will tell you this is your username up here in the right top. Once you are now on this dashboard, you can see that on the free tier, you have 1 hour of playtime per day on one playground. Now, for me as a security professional, one of the earliest use cases was actually those playgrounds. Because when back in the day, and actually still today, if I do anything security related, I need to switch quickly between different Linuxes. And what I used to have and still sometimes use are one of my 9 old Lenovo ThinkPads. And when I discovered that I can have here these different playgrounds, I can have, for example, an Ubuntu 2404. And actually, I can also change the kernel. I can change the kernel to be a kernel 5 or a kernel 6. And there's this button that says destroy. So now that the playground is live and I could be installing all sorts of things, do whatever I want. And then I click here on terminate and it's gone. It's completely wiped. They're completely ephemeral, which makes trying out whatever sort of things that you might not be sure about just extremely cheap. But also the fact that I can switch between an Arch, a Kali, an Ubuntu, a Red Hat, a Fedora, etc. If I switched off the playground now, I also naturally come to the playground configuration page. This is where I can set up and configure my own playground, because anything that is on the public listed under playgrounds, where I would say it's about 20 official playgrounds, you can use them as a base to construct your own. I already mentioned that you can choose the kernel between a 5.10 and a 6.1. You can use local IP addresses, ranges. You can be root or a different user. And if I click configure, I actually get even more ways of making this my own. This becomes especially important if I become an author, because the origin story of Iximiuz Labs is that Ivan used to blog, or he still blogs, but he wanted to have a way of blogging that was more interactive and more juicy in a sense. And I don't want to speak for him, but the idea is that it's not, like, reading code that is there in a markdown even or in a whatever format is only as useful as you can touch it. Like I would usually copy paste it, good old copy pasting from Stack Overflow, and then try it out on a laptop. But what is cool here is that I can try out the things live, right? What I'm reading, I can experiment it. And very, very often in a blog, people don't cover the things I want to see, right? They cover something that is sort of kind of like a little bit like it. So when I'm configuring my own content, one of the things is very handy is that I usually, unless I untoggle it, have a VS Code server in a playground. So I can code, I could log into GitHub to display things like graphical, like PNGs, for example. The other part that is very important is that the machine settings have quotas. So in this case, you see that I've got 4 GPU, 8 RAM, and 40 gigs of disk space. And what is also extremely important is that I can add init conditions. Now, I personally prefer to do this in the Markdown, not in the UI. I'm not a UI person, but you can put conditions that have to be true at the initialization. We already talked about networks, and I could also put a registry there. So I can base playground. So I've got all these different playgrounds here, and I can put them as a base and then start from them. And the most flexible of all of them is called Flexbox. So, so here, most options, because you can even add new machines. Now I'm still on the free tier user, so I cannot add new machines, but if I was on the premium, I could use up to 5 VMs at once, which, if you're doing some sort of maybe purple teaming or any form of advanced network debugging or network shenanigans, scanning, for example, discovering inventory, discovering ports from one machine to another, all of the machines are different. Or if you want to try out DevOps kind of workflows where one is a build agent, the other one is a Terraform runner, and then you have actual machines to do something. Or you can't do real IAC, you can't do real infrastructure as code, but you can mimic quite a few things here. Another important thing to say is actually, of course, there's a lot of content on the webpage already. These are mostly Ivan's blogs, and there is a Discord server. So in case you want to chat with people and join the community, you can actually join the server. There's quite a bit of traffic there. And the other part is that the content now isn't just Ivan anymore. You can even become a featured author. For example, you can go to my content. Oops, now I'm still the dummy user. Let me go to my actual content where I'm logged in as myself. And here I can go to courses, and then I can say community content. And this is, for example, my stuff. And yeah, so it's starting that there are other authors. In the tutorial section, there's more community content already by Mark and by Rory and other awesome people. So maybe we start from a user or reader perspective. So if I open one of these playgrounds, then I have to wait a little bit, and I've got these tasks up here that I have to do somehow, right? And I have at least one terminal typically open, and I have the aforementioned IDE, which is VS Code Server. And there we go. Right, so might notice. And here you can work if you're not the Vim kind of person. So, and one of the cool things is if I was the author of this thing, I can put tasks there. So you just saw this went green, right? This is for the UX. I can guide a reader through what exactly they're doing. And then I can put example content. In this case, for example, what I'm doing is I'm letting people check that whatever this mount command just did, like, is what actually happened here. So I want to have the user to have a feedback of what happened. Okay, there suddenly are these files. And then I'm also giving a collapsible content here. This was collapsible, you see? And people can compare, oh, what I got in my shell was what the author actually wanted. And this is really good if you have complicated or long content sections, because sometimes you want to go back and like check where did something go wrong when you deviate or when you're going crazy and you go on your own, which is of course cool, right? You want to use these labs to even destroy them or do some funkiness that you like and be creative. But it often leads to states of the system that they don't work anymore. And so having these points where you can compare, that would have been the state at that point, that's pretty good. Another thing that we can do, which is pretty nifty, is we can have, we already talked about the ID tab, right, where you can display pictures without having to install any funkiness or downloading files. And so there's actually, if you want to author something, there's a tutorial on authoring content, and you see it's also live. And there's also actually the GitHub of the source code of the sample tutorial. So going back to Live Lab, we have other things that we can do. We can, for example, share a web terminal. And this is a pretty cool feature that I've often used, especially when I'm working with other people remotely, home office and all that. So I like to, nope, see, that was the wrong one. I like to share the web terminal a lot. So here I can say, well, either as root or as the user, I want to give public access to someone else. And if this other person then goes onto this shell, they, whoever they are, they might be, another open source maintainer or someone I'm working with on a feature. And while we're both debugging, I can, maybe I was testing somebody else's feature and found something. They can now check, oh, that was the state the system is in. And that means the data is there, the config is there. exactly whatever nonsense I did. Even the bash history is there, so the other person can look at it and see where things went wrong, which can be very efficient indeed. Something else that I really like is I often have to install tools like for databases, you have UIs that help you build queries. Or in this case, we have some Python situation going on, and I like to have Jupyter. So how about we run Jupyter and expose it in the browser here, just next to our lab. And this is exactly what happens. So it takes a while to pull down the container. And what I now have is a Docker container in which Jupyter is running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this token here that Jupyter gives me in the output. And now I'm going to go to expose port. I'm running this on 8080, no, on 48s. I'm just going to press expose, go to this now opening UI, which if you've ever used Jupyter is very familiar to you. And no, I don't want to save this. And now I have the typical Jupyter. So yeah, now I have an interactive Python shell. What I particularly like is that you have the typical upload functionality. If I think back on how I actually discovered the labs, that was for me teaching a class at university. And container networking is a very dry topic to teach, especially if you have a large room full of people, in this case between 40 and 50 people. And you have to keep people's attention and you have to somehow be able to react when things go wrong. And this tutorial I can really recommend. And it also is a good showcase of how things work. Because what we got here is not just the playground itself, but we have for example, these challenges inlaid. So when you're teaching, you always have students that are way ahead, students that are maybe sleepy today, and then you've got students that are just doing it in their own pace, right? So giving people a good level of alternative difficulty levels and being able to work the way they like to learn is pretty important. So having this ability to just read it, which is one thing. The other one, to have a live system where I can just code whatever I like. But then also to have these challenges in there. So for those who may already be familiar with the content, and for those types that are just like, very competitive, you have inserts where you have challenges, where there's a problem. Then if you want to see the solution, it's also there. Again, different learners have different um, priorities and preferences of how to solve something. And then you can go to the Discord if you're completely lost, and ask Ivan or anyone on the channel. And just my 2 cents is the the tutorial on container networking is it's like finger scales on the piano, right? It's something that you should do with a certain regularity and make sure that you understand the absolute basics of containers and especially container networking. So actually I do it about once a year, and it's one of my favorite pieces to go to if I get stuck again, like why is there no connectivity or something like that.